We live in the age of AGI, and a lot of things are happening in the world, and they often have to do with technology. But we have to remember, we are still living in countries. We live in the United States, we live in the European Union, we live in these countries, and politics still matters. And in these turmoil-laden times, we are actually encountering all kinds of important political movements, and what is happening in Germany might actually derail the entire EU project. Let me explain what is going on there. In September, very soon, we will have an election in a small state in Germany. It's not that small, medium-sized state in Germany. It's called Sachsen-Anhalt. You see it here. This is where it is. You see that state in the middle of Germany, or in the east, Middle East, the Middle East of Germany. And that state will have an election. And that election is shaping up to be the thing that could topple or will topple the German federal government within months, potentially. And it's shaping up more and more to be exactly what everyone is expecting about the situation. And we want to cover that right here. So the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, is now polling at 42 to 43%, which is effectively, potentially, an absolute majority, because as you probably know, in Europe or in many democracies, you have these thresholds, the minimum hurdle you need to go above. And if enough parties drop out because they can't exceed that 5% hurdle, they are not getting into parliament. And then the parliament seats are not 100%, but 100%. It's just 90%, for example, or 95% that is being shared among the parties that get in, which means 43% could be the absolute majority. And in case you didn't follow this whole drama that is unfolding in the heartland of Europe, which is Germany, the most powerful economy, the largest country in Europe by population, and by far the most heaviest weighted country in the European Union. Without Germany, nothing can happen in the European Union. And the AfD is the alternative party. And so in that situation in Germany, you see that a lot of the old parties are not even playing a role anymore. Here you see the polling for Sachsen-Anhalt for the upcoming election on September 6th, which is in basically 2 weeks. And what you see is the AfD is massively leading. And you have to understand, the AfD is considered a party you can't even think about in Germany right now. Of course, half of the population disagrees, but the population normally has not much say in these things. Well, until they actually vote for the party. So if you are any mainstream media outlet, any of the other parties, the consensus right now still is the AfD is something you can't even talk about. They are the evil. There's no actual reason behind that, by the way. It's very fascinating when you see it. It's not like discussions in the United States when people hate Trump. They actually have a bunch of reasons. When people hate Kamala, they have a bunch of reasons. No one is running around and says, I hate Trump because he's a communist. Because then people would ask, but why is Trump a communist? You can say all kinds of things about Trump, but why is he a communist? He's just not a communist. And so that actually doesn't happen in the United States. You don't have a lot of people running around saying Trump is a terrible communist or Kamala is a terrible white supremacist. It just doesn't make sense. In the United States, the hate comes more attached to something. But in Germany, it's a very interesting thing. People just say the AfD is the worst thing and you can't even discuss it and you can't even touch it, which is very interesting for me looking into Germany from the outside. So that is a very revolutionary result here, 42%, but all over East Germany, the AfD is close to 40% or over 40%. So it's coming. The second party is the current ruling party, the CDU, which is supposedly the conservative party. The AfD is also conservative, so they're both conservative, but the CDU is the established conservative party and the AfD is the new kind of conservative libertarian party. And now they are outperforming the CDU. Why is this so important? Because the AfD, even though it's now the biggest party in polls in Germany, has never been in the government, right? They have never been a governing party because no one is willing to form a coalition with them because there's this firewall strategy introduced by the CDU. The CDU is the most concerned party about the AfD because they are too close. It's basically the Republican Party. Imagine you had a second Republican Party, which is more resurgent. America First versus MAGA. Of course, MAGA is going to say America First is the most horrible thing that ever happened to America. They're worse than the socialists because they're the most scary ones for MAGA. And it's a similar situation here. Consider AfD, Germany first, and CDU, whatever, the Christian Democrats. And so what is happening here is that Sachsen-Anhalt might be the domino that leads to the demise of the CDU and leads to the first state in Germany that will be ruled by the AfD. And because everyone is so scared, the Spiegel, which is kind of the New York Times of Germany, and I'm not saying this as an insult, it's more like a fact. They would maybe even say that themselves. And they just had a cover about that race because that race is so important. That race is so important that the Spiegel had this now infamous cover that I'm going to show you in a second about that race. And they announced that this poor man who is running for that party. Oh my God, so difficult to get even to this thing. I have to show it to you in Google because they're being too difficult. So this is basically what the Spiegel came up with, which is the biggest magazine, as something like the New York Times, just to make it simple, in Germany. And they had this man who is the front runner, the AfD front runner, the man who's probably going to become this guy here, become the prime minister, the governor of Sachsen-Anhalt. And they called him the most dangerous man in Germany. Okay, so they called Ulrich Siegmund the most dangerous man in Germany. And there's lots of YouTube mockery about that because when they list the reasons why he's the most dangerous man, it's because in high school he was popular with the girls. I'm not kidding you. He was popular with the girls. Extremely dangerous. You can imagine what happens then. So that is happening. He is liked by the people. And that gives you a little bit an insight into the delusion. That's very shocking to me. I'm like not in Germany. So when I go back to Germany, it's like, whoa, you people are delusional. It's very irritating. It's like a mass psychosis. The logic is the following. You say he was popular with the high school girls. He is likable. He talks to voters. And things like that. And that is the reason why he's the most dangerous man in Germany. And as a foreigner, as an American, as an Australian, you would hear that's like, wait a moment, but why is this so dangerous? And the interesting thing is this psychosis in Germany about the AfD is so bad that they don't even have to list anymore why this is so dangerous because everyone just knows it's so dangerous. So the logic here is the following. If someone is horribly dangerous like the AfD, and no one knows why, but that's just what it is. They are like the devil. What is more dangerous? A devil that looks like the devil or a devil that is popular with high school girls that is then liked by the voters and talks to the voters? Of course, that's the most dangerous devil. So once you understand this is the devil, then it's very dangerous that he's such a nice devil. But of course, as a normal person would ask, what if he's not the devil? What if he's just nice? And that's why everyone wants to vote for him, which is a little bit what it is. So he says all the right things, he's nice, and he just says we need to clean up this mess because Germany is going down the drain. So that's happening. Hey, on this channel, we do something very important. We deeply analyze, understand, and predict capital, AGI, and politics. Not just to beat the markets and make a lot of money, even though that's important, but also to build a new society and make the future good for all of us, the pioneers. If you want to help me on this journey, you can do that by doing a very simple thing. Like and subscribe. It helps me a lot. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get back to the video. And so victory seems inevitable at this point, especially after this Spiegel, this magazine, did that. Now everyone thinks, what the hell is even happening? What are you guys talking about? And so this seems to be a train wreck in the making for the chancellor. Because here, to go back, you see the Chancellor Merz here on the right side. This is Alice Weidel. She's the boss of the AfD on the federal level. And the problem for them is that if this actually happens, there is no good outcome for Merz. Even if the AfD would not win the absolute majority. Here's the exact problem. Why this election is a pivot point for German politics and potentially for all of Europe. Because right now it's not even clear how it cannot lead to the downfall of the government. Let me explain why. Because there are only two options right now when you see this. Either the AfD gets to 43% and just wins because this little party the BSW is dropping out and doesn't get over this threshold, that's now the question. Will the BSW get over the threshold or not? If they are not taking that threshold, and they're right there right now, 5%. If they're not getting over that hurdle, they're not getting into the parliament, and the FD has the absolute majority and will provide the governor and control the parliament because they don't need anyone. Okay, they don't need a coalition if you have the absolute majority, which is very rare, by the way, in Europe. No one has absolute majorities. But here, they pushed it so far that the people said, we have had it, just give them the absolute majority. You can't just block us. If the BSW gets over the threshold, then the AfD might be short 1 percentage point, 2 percentage points, and cannot rule alone. Okay, and then we have an interesting situation. Because what happens then? Then the CDU could form a coalition with these people and say, well, we keep the government and we just rule with the other people. Okay? Or the BSW could say, well, we go with the AfD and for the first time form a coalition with them, kind of. And the problem is, maybe you think, well, if the BSW gets over the 5% and therefore the AfD cannot control the government and cannot become the government, isn't that good for the CDU? Because they could then stay in power with these other guys. Well, there's a little problem, which is why a lot of CDU people secretly want the AfD to get the absolute majority. So they are not being put in that predicament that I will outline now. You have to understand who the other people are. This is not a good situation. Die Linke is the successor party, and I'm not kidding, it's true. It is the direct successor party of the SED. And the SED was the single dictator party of communist East Germany. Okay, so that is the party that was in charge of East Germany, killed tens of thousands of people that did not fall in line, and shot thousands of Germans who wanted to flee in the back at the wall. These people built the wall and they murdered their own people. So they're not nice. That's what I want to say. And they do not apologize. The Linke is like, no, we do this again. That's why we're in the race. We want to kill the rich people. I'm not going to go into details, but there's all these discussions leaking from the Linke where they plan, or they discuss it at least, maybe jokingly, who knows, but they want to shoot the richest 1%. That's what one of them said. Once we have shot the richest 1%, then we can proceed with this and that. And no one pushed back, of course. No one said, no, we shouldn't do that. So you have to understand when Americans talk about, oh, Democrats are communists. I mean, these people are communists. They wouldn't even say they're not. And if you're a Christian conservative party like the CDU and you start doing coalitions with people like that, you might run into some problems with your own voters who then even go to the AfD in even larger numbers and say, you are nuts. Right? You were saying you want to block the AfD from governing. Why? Because they're the same as you. They have the same program. And instead you're partnering with people who want to literally shoot us. You lost your marbles. And that's why a lot of CDU people secretly hope the AfD gets the absolute majority, because if they don't, and we will have these discussions under Mertz's leadership, who's pushing towards a coalition with these people, this could be the end of the CDU. So as you can imagine, for this guy here, for Merz on the right side, it looks very bad. Either the AfD wins the absolute majority, which is very bad for him. That's a signal that people want to get rid of him. Or they don't win, and then the CDU, what are they going to do? They're trapped. And if you add this up to these polls that we have currently on the national level, where the AfD has the highest polling results, this is for all of Germany. These are the German federal polling results. Absolutely stunning. The CDU at the lowest level ever polled since 1949. That is just 4 years after a certain Austrian got killed or killed himself. So that's pretty bad. It's the worst result in the history of the CDU. And of course, the AfD is the big beneficiary because these are the same parties. Effectively, they have the same program, except for maybe Russia and the EU. But everything else, they say the same thing. Only that the CDU has proven that it doesn't do these things. That's why people are running away. And the AfD is at 28%. That's very high. And you see that everyone else is also losing compared to the previous election. And so if there is a federal election, of course the AfD won't get the absolute majority, but you see who's going to win this. Now, why would there be an election? Because Merz is under tremendous pressure to step down. And these results are absolutely devastating, by the way. So it is very likely that there will be a ripple effect. There is lots of talk behind the scenes in the CDU already. Get rid of Merz. We have to get rid of Merz because the CDU is bleeding. 20% is beyond the pale. 30% would even be problematic, but 20% means the leadership of the CDU is the absolute worst in the history of the CDU, which is not an endorsement. And so that is the situation. We are going to track this very closely because once this happens, Europe will not be the same. This might just be one state in Germany, one of 16 states. It's a reasonably important state. It reflects what's going on. There are other East German states who have similar things going on. This is the first one where this actually might happen, and this would be the death nail for the chancellorship of Merz. Now, in the daily brief, we have the political weekly brief coming up here, and we will actually talk about 3 more topics in that weekly brief. Go to pioneerlands.org to check this out. The BSW maneuvering backfires in Thuringia. So we will go a little bit into what this BSW party is and what they're actually doing there behind the scenes. We will go into then what an AfD-led Germany would mean for the EU and what the AfD, who is now on track to becoming some type of ruling party in Germany, sooner or later, maybe sooner, but latest in 2029, much more likely in some form in 2027, in my opinion. Let's see. Still hard to see how, but there will be the largest party and there will be very likely elections. What will the AfD actually do with the European Union if they would ever get in charge, which they very likely will? And they have a whole plan, a federation of European nations. They have actually a plan. They are not weaklings. They're not going to say, fine, we just keep the EU. There is things going on that will break this whole thing, in my opinion. We will talk about Sweden because Sweden also has a national election coming up September 13th. And that's very important also as a signal for Europe. Interesting stuff. And we will see what this all means for Europe. So see you in the weekly brief. To see the full weekly brief, go to pioneerlands.org. Every single week, we bring you the latest in politics and the cutting edge developments in the United States and Europe, so we can follow the crazy transformations that are happening in this age of AGI. The matrix is imploding and everything is changing. So check it out on pioneerlands.org. You also find 2 other weekly briefs. One, stocks and capital markets, where we cover stocks like Tesla, SpaceX, and of course the markets as a whole. And we also have an AI Frontier weekly brief, where you learn about the latest models, the latest ChatGPT developments, Anthropic and Claude, Grok, and the Chinese models, so you are up to date also on technology. See you in Pioneerlands.